What's up, YouTube? Won't go over some small block Ford stuff for you Ford guys out there, Mustang guys. Won't be talking about some, well, I guess e7s, gt40s versus aluminum heads. So you guys stay tuned and check it out. So you guys all know what my e7s did. Ended up going in the 9s, 10s. But I never gone over with you guys what they did from the stock engine, unported, stock cam, intake carb, exhaust. That was it. Factory rockers, push rods, the whole nine. I never said the gain necessarily that they've actually gained. So, basing it off of mile an hour, I put these time slips together here. And the car at its best went 11,821 at 113.52 miles per hour. With the all factory non-ported crap, which is a E7 302 long block with a dual plane 650 carburetor and long tube headers. 11,821 at 113.5 mile an hour. The ported heads, just bolting on these ported heads, they were E7s, ported. Nothing else. Good valve springs, that's it. Nothing else done though. Just a good pair of valve springs. And the runners, intake, exhaust, bowl area, stuff like that. Factory valves. They weren't cut. Nothing of that nature was done. The car's spinning due to a brake hose that blew on me and I didn't realize it. The car went 1151 at 117.6 miles per hour. The first pass. Second pass, it went 1160s. It spun worse. And that was due to that brake line leaking onto my tire. And the car just blew the tires off to the point where it went sideways. I had to let out of it and get back in it. And it went like 116 mile an hour that pass. Almost 117 again. So that tells me I had more left in it. But basing off of the mile an hour, we gained 3.5 mile an hour. So therefore, it's pretty much, if I got it figured out right, around 45 to 50 horsepower. Guesstimating. I can't guarantee that number because I didn't dyno this setup. So, but basing off mile per hour, pushing air, you know, at that, in an 11-second car, what you would pick up, that's roughly 50 horse. So, the other day, scrolling Facebook, and it was a Mustang group or small block Ford group, and I found these heads. These are Trick Flow KPI high port heads. Now these are one of the OG Trick Flow heads for a small block Ford. These are one of the top of the line heads you could get at the time. And this is their box showing a 40 horsepower gain on a factory 225 horsepower 302, 265 horsepower with these heads. Now, you can see that with other mods, they're up around 375, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But on a factory 302, and who knows if they put exhaust on it or anything, but we'll, just for the sake of it, we'll say that everything was bone stock, factory. And it's 40 horsepower, just bolting the heads on, and that's it. Factory manifolds or headers, because that year did have headers on it. Factory 55 millimeter throttle body to pan. 40 horse. Your E7s ported can do the same thing. I find that interesting, because E7s, according to everybody on the foxbody planet, are junk. Anybody who's into a Mustang knows that an E7 is junk. And they are junk. Now, there's going to be a lot of you guys saying, yeah, but it takes to be ported to do that. I would hope so. Because, I mean, a factory head out of the box shouldn't outperform an aftermarket aluminum head that's top of the line at the time. These heads were like $1,000 new, $1,200 back then. Considering a Performer was $6,000 to $8,000, I think. These heads were $1,000, $1,200, if I remember correctly. I might be off on my numbers a little bit. If somebody wants to correct me, feel free to. But just make sure you know Performer and that head, very different price range. So, that's if the Performer was even out when these heads came out. Because, like I said, these are an original small block Ford. This is one of the first good heads for a small block Ford. They were top of the line. But that just goes to show you that a top of the line head back then was equivalent to a thumper ported E7. So your average guy could go get a Mustang and port the heads and go just as fast as a guy who bought a Mustang and put on a set of trick flow KPI heads. Now we're going to get into cam, intake, throttle body, injectors, or cam, intake, carburetor, and then headers. Now, it made 375 with other mods. So 375 with a cam, intake, injectors, headers, or intake, carb, exhaust. And that's a pretty big increase from 265. That's 110 horsepower. So you don't think an E7 on a stock bottom end 302 can make the same power? Porta E7s with a cam, intake, carb. I can tell you right now, on a stock bottom end, it will. As long as the heads are done correctly, all day, you can make the same power. GT40 head, make the same power. The P's, I'm not a fan of them. They can make the same power. And I'm not saying down to the T, but you're going to be in the ballpark of 375 crank horsepower, just like this ad is stating. With the technology they have now and the cams and stuff, they're, might even make more with that combination. Now, if you want to go max effort, stock bottom end 302, where you're notching the pistons in this thing, shoving a 600 and something lift cam in it, making this stuff fit, then the KPI heads will most likely start to outperform the E7s. Your GT40s, it's going to be borderline. Probably will still outperform them slightly. Nowadays, you have better heads. So your better heads will start to, outperform with a camshaft up on that level. The combination has to be there for these camshafts, or for these combinations to work. The heads, all that. Everything has to match to an extent. So if you have a stroker motor with compression, big cam, then yeah, the KPI heads will outrun an E7 for sure. But you need that stroke, that bore, the cubic inch. You need the cam. That stuff has to be there. Most of the guys that want your average street car to go 12s and 11s, that's a mild setup. It takes a mild setup to go those speeds, especially with a stock bottom end. If you want to do it stock bottom end, you're talking, you can port a set of heads, put a cam in it, small cam, 530 lift or whatever, maybe even smaller than that. And at the end of the day, really, it's going to be better drivability with that ported E7 than it will with the aluminum head and a bigger camshaft, because you don't need that big camshaft with an E7. You don't need the 540 lift cam really pushing that thing. You know, that's even if you had the clearance to do it, because the valves and stuff get bigger in the aftermarket heads, and you start to lose the tolerance that you have with an E7. There's a lot of variables into this stuff. A lot. If you take, say, a trick flow head with a 208 valve, say you find a gangster set of trick flows done that somebody did with a 208 valve, and you put them on a stock bottom end 302, you're not going to be able to fit a 550, 560 lift cam. I mean, you might if you use a thick head gasket and you do all the tricks, but it's going to be a mutt, because now you're killing compression out of it. It's a mixed match combination at the end of the day. Forgive me for my squeaky chair. And I can give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So my engine with the ported heads, GT40 sized valves, heads were milled, E7s, milled down, Anderson M51 camshaft, Action Plus intake, 750 carburetor. I did dyno it. It made like 320 wheel horsepower, and I forget the torque number exactly, but it was in the 300 and change mark. 300 and might have even been 320 something. Might have been higher than the horsepower, to be honest. I can't remember now, but it was up there pretty good. My buddy's engine that I assembled, it's for our other friend who passed away. He said he wanted an engine that could go 10s with the 302 until he went to a Windsor. I said, well, you could do the heads, the E7s. I said, but they'll be small for a Windsor later on. He said, no, I'd rather just buy the heads for the Windsor and get that purchase over with and put those on a Windsor later on. I said, well, any head you buy for a Windsor is going to be too big for a 302 to get everything out of it. I said, but I can find you a happy medium where you could buy these heads, put them on, take them back off, port them for your 351, especially if you do a stroker, and they'll work pretty good. And those were the Trick Flow 11Rs, 190s. He bought that, Anderson M51, so the same camshaft I have, and an Assault intake, the cheap eBay Assault intake, because this was all temporary stuff. But I knew this combination would make roughly around the same power I made, and the car would go in the 10s, because it was going to be on the lighter side, and he was going to hit it with some nitrous, stock T5, can't really push it that hard, so he was just trying to have fun with this thing. So I put the motor together, I degreed the cam in, I think it was anywhere from 2 to 4 degrees retarded. I put 50 thousandths head gaskets on it because I knew that these heads would hit. The clearance isn't there. So I degreed the cam so it wouldn't interfere with the piston. And a thick head gasket to be safe. And I sent it. And I told him what I was doing. So I was up front with him. He said, that's fine. He goes, as long as it runs like what your car basically did, I'll be happy. In the 10s, all motor, and then if I can spray it in the 9s, I'm content. I'm happy with that. I said, all right, this will do it. Now, he passed away before getting the car together, but my other friend ended up getting it and putting it together. And that car made 330 wheel horsepower and I think 310 foot-pounds of torque. Now, the engine ended up not being in the best shape. I guess that blow-by, one of the cylinders was kind of down a little bit. But it wasn't completely dead. But, I mean, the horsepower number, it's 330 wheel horsepower, which is actually pretty good power out of a 302 with heads cam intake. This is to the wheel, not at the crank. So at the crank, it's about, going back to that ad, 375, that's about where we're at through a T5 if you count the drivetrain loss and all that. It's about where you're at, 375 horse, roughly. If you want to really figure that math out, by all means, you can put the exact number in the comments. I'm not doing it right now. But it made 10 horsepower more than what mine did. Now, my head gasket thickness compressed was around 30 thousandths. I didn't have the MLS gaskets. It's either 30 or 35 thousandths compressed is the gasket that I use. But my heads are milled down. But those trick flows have a smaller chamber too. So, that being said, compression, he had less than what I had, most likely. So I had a little bit more compression due to my chamber size, my head's being milled, and a little bit thinner of a head gasket. My cam was in standard, dot to dot. I didn't advance it. So there's probably some power there, I'd imagine. So, yeah, he made 10 more horsepower. He probably could have made more. You're also talking about 11 degree head compared to a inline head, canted valve compared to inline. So that's probably where that power, that 10 horsepower, really came from. Not so much because it's an aluminum head with a bigger runner, probably due to the canted valve, is what I'm going to go off of on that. Carburetors were both 750s, same cam, just like I said, degree different, stock bottom end 302s. So, he took the expensive way. You know, the heads now are, at the time I think they were $1,800, now they're around $2,200. Where I took, my dad does the heads, so for me it didn't cost me nothing to port the heads, it cost me to put valves in them and have them milled. And I think that was around $300 to $500 to have done. So I have about $500 into an E7 set of E7s. But they run with trick flows. And it also shines a light on why people back in the day would have their E7s ported. You know, you see some older cars for sale that have been together for 20, 30 years, ported E7s, thumper E7s, you know. And it just goes to show that those heads work just as good as a set of aluminum heads on a stock bottom end 302. Now, if you have a stroker, the aluminum head will start to outrun an E7 head, obviously, if the combination's there. But a lot of you guys that have street cars, you're not trying to go 9s and 8s. You're happy with a 12, 11 second car. You know, when you start hitting the 10-second territory, that's when you start needing to up things. And most of you guys get strokers and stuff anyway when you want to go that fast. You can do it with a stock bottom end 302. It's been done more than once. I'm not the only one who's done it. I'm one of the only ones who's done it with a stock bottom end 302 and E7s. But people do it all the time with head scam intake, you know, good set of heads on a stock bottom end 302. And some of them cars fly. I mean, you're talking mid-10s, you know, someone who knows what they're doing could get in the low 10s even. Really, if you really wanted to push it with a good set of aluminum heads. I think even 9s is capable in the right car, to be honest, with a stock bottom end 302. But that's when it's going to start really, your head is going to, that bigger head will start to come around with the big cam in it. If you can get away with it and you notch the pistons, you're going to start doing things that people don't like to do. And it starts to get dangerous where it's possible that the chance of the engine can blow up when you start doing this stuff. And a lot of you guys want a dependable combination. So for dependability and mild on a stock bottom end, my point is this. To sum this all up, there's really no reason other than simplicity of buying it and bolting it on. There's no reason to buy an aftermarket set of heads for a small block Ford 302. Unless you're really trying to do something. Like I said, mild. I'm talking you want drivability. You want to be able to cruise this thing around on pump gas and bust off an 11-second time slip. You can do it with a pair of ported e7s or gt40s, and you can do this in your home. Don't take a mad scientist to do this. You can watch my dad's videos, Terry Grover, and he can tell you what to do. He has some e7 head porting videos on here. He's doing a set for our buddy, and I'm sure he'll probably post more videos on that. But he can show you what to do, and you can follow his guidance, and you can get relatively close to the same job. Because, you know, he can physically see what he's doing in front of him where you guys might not be able to on camera. So, therefore, you might not get the exact same, and I'm talking within a couple CFMs, so I'm not saying that your head's going to be completely under his. You might even find something that maybe works better. Who knows, you know? But you can get relatively close is my point. And you can do it for what it costs in sanding rules and your time and cutters. So, $200 if you have a drill already. If you don't, you know, $300. And that's on the high side of things. So for $300, you can port your heads and go 11s or 12s, depending on the rest of your combination, you know. So, that being said, if you're one of them guys that wants to take the time and do something like that, by all means, don't be afraid to do it. Get on it, get it done, and have some fun. And if you're one of the guys that just wants simple bolt on, there's nothing wrong with that. Get out there, find a set of heads, bolt them on. Whatever you guys don't do is buy GT40 SVO heads unless you plan to port them, because those heads suck. Maybe I'm being biased because I've ran them and I didn't have good luck with them, but they're definitely, I think I'd rather a stock E7 than a set of SVO heads out of the box, to be honest with you. So, that about sums this video up. You know, point blank, 40 horsepower gain from the KPIs on a stock 302. Do cam, intake, you know, carburetor or throttle body with injectors and exhaust, 375 horse. Or you can make the same power at the crank with a pair of ported E7s or GT40s. Whatever you choose, get that thing together and have some fun. That's what matters at the end of the day. You guys have a good one. I'll talk to you later.